The floor under my feet was already shaking when the first alarm cut through the station. I was halfway through sweeping the evening platform when the lights flickered from white to red, and a deep groan rolled through the metal walls like something enormous had woken up underneath us. I froze, broom still in my hand, every instinct in my body screaming at me to run. But then I heard the sound that mattered more than the alarm. A child crying, somewhere past the ticket gates, high and frightened and small. Mira. I dropped the broom and ran. The transit station had never been kind to me. Most days the humans here looked away when I passed, or gripped their children's hands a little tighter, as if my scales might rub off and turn their sons and daughters into something monstrous too. But none of that mattered now. Mira was in this building, and her father was 2 days into a supply run on the outer ring, and there was no one else standing between her and whatever was tearing through the support beams above us. I found her near the lower stairwell, pressed into a corner with 2 other children I recognized from the evening transit line, a boy named Callum and a small girl named Ellie. The ceiling panel above them had cracked open, and sparks were spitting down in bright orange threads, catching on the dry paper of an abandoned schedule board. Smoke curled along the ceiling in a slow, spreading sheet. Mira saw me first. Her whole face changed, fear breaking apart into something closer to relief. I want you to understand something about fear. My people know it better than most. We fled our home when the Kothi Reach collapsed, and we arrived here with nothing, learning very quickly that a wrong step, a raised claw, even a loud breath, could turn frightened humans against us in an instant. So I had trained myself, every day, every hour, to be small, to be quiet, to be the kind of creature nobody had a reason to point a rifle at. But there was no time to be small now. I crossed the platform in 3 strides and dropped to my knees in front of the children, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The heat from the sparking panel pressed against my back like a hand. Listen to me, I told them, keeping my voice low and even, the way Mira's father spoke to her when she was scared of the dark. We are going to walk together, very calmly, toward the far doors. Nobody needs to run. I have you. Ellie was crying too hard to move. Callum had gone rigid, staring up at the cracked panel like it might swallow him. I did the only thing I could think to do. I wrapped one arm around Ellie, lifted her against my side, and held my other hand out to Callum. Take my hand, I said. I promise you it will not hurt you. He looked at my claws. I watched him decide, in that split second children decide things, that the stranger in front of him was less frightening than the fire behind him. His small fingers closed around mine. Mira didn't need convincing. She grabbed a fold of my sleeve, the way she always did, like it was the most natural thing in the world, and we started moving. The smoke thickened as we crossed the platform, curling low enough now that I told all 3 of them to keep their heads down, to breathe through their sleeves if they could. Somewhere above us, metal shrieked against metal, and a support strut gave way with a crash that sent a wave of dust rolling across the floor. Ellie screamed into my shoulder. I held her tighter and kept walking, because stopping was the one thing none of us could afford. We were halfway to the doors when a woman's voice rang out through the smoke, sharp with panic. "That's them! Get back from her!" I turned, and saw a station worker standing near the emergency exit, arm raised, phone lifted like a weapon, instead of the communication device it actually was. Her eyes were wide, fixed not on the fire, not on the danger closing in around all of us, but on me, on my scales, on the fact that I had my arms around 3 human children in the middle of a collapsing station. I understand fear. I have spent 11 years learning to move around it, softening myself to survive inside it. But in that moment, with smoke pressing into my lungs and a child crying against each side of me, I did not have room left, for fear that wasn't about the fire. "She is helping us," Mira shouted, her voice cracking but clear. "She is helping us, not hurting us." The woman hesitated. It was only a second, but it felt much longer, smoke thickening between us, another crash sounding somewhere behind me. Then she lowered her arm and ran toward the exit instead, waving it open, holding it against the pressure of the building's failing systems, so the 4 of us could get through. We stumbled out into the cool evening air together, and I set Ellie down gently, checking Callum's hands, checking Mira's face, checking that all 3 of them were breathing clean air, and not the smoke that still poured out behind us in slow gray ribbons. Around us, more people were spilling out of the station, coughing, calling names, gathering into small, frightened clusters on the pavement. Nobody thanked me. Not right away. Most of them were too busy finding their own families, counting their own children, and I understood that. I sat down on the curb with Mira tucked against my side, Ellie and Callum close by, until their own families found them in the crowd, and I let my hands shake now that there was finally room to let them. It was almost an hour before Daniel arrived. I heard him before I saw him, his voice cutting through the crowd, raw and desperate, calling Mira's name over and over. He must have gotten word of the fire the second his transport landed, because he was still in his work clothes, dust from the outer ring caked along his sleeves, his face pale in a way I had never seen on him before. Mira spotted him first, and was on her feet, and running before I could stop her. He dropped to his knees and caught her, wrapping both arms around her so tightly I saw her wince, though she didn't complain, just buried her face against his shoulder and held on. He looked up at me over her head. There were 100 things in his eyes in that moment, and none of them were the fear I had spent 11 years learning to expect from humans. "What happened?" he said, voice shaking. "There was a fire in the lower level," I told him. "Mira is safe. She was very brave." He closed his eyes for a long moment, like he needed to feel the truth of that sentence settle into his body before he could trust it. When he opened them again, he looked at me the way he had the very first evening he'd asked me to watch his daughter. Not like I was something to be managed or feared. Like I was someone he was grateful existed. "You got her out," he said. "It wasn't a question." "I did not do it alone," I told him. "But yes, I was there. I would not have left her." He stood, Mira still curled against him, and reached out with his free hand. It hovered for a second, like he wasn't sure if the gesture would be welcome, and then he set it firmly on my shoulder, the same way he might have touched a friend, a neighbor, someone he trusted with everything he had. "Thank you," he said, and his voice cracked on the second word. I did not know what to say to that, so for a while, I said nothing at all, and simply let the warmth of it sit in my chest, gentle and unfamiliar, like sunlight after a long winter. The days after the fire were strange in a way I had not expected. Word travels fast in a station like ours, and by the second morning, half the platform seemed to know that a dragon woman had carried 3 children out of a collapsing stairwell, while the ceiling came down around her. Some people still looked away when I passed, old habits carved too deep to shift in a week. But others stopped. An older man named Walter, who had never once spoken to me in the 2 years I had worked the evening shift, came up to me by the supply closet and simply said, "My grandson was one of the children you helped. I wanted you to know his name is Callum, in case you'd like to know how he's doing. He is doing very well." A young woman named Grace, who ran the food stall near the west entrance, started leaving a small parcel of bread out for me at the end of my shift, without ever saying much about it, just a nod and a small smile that told me everything the silence couldn't. It was not everyone. It was not even most people. But it was enough to feel, for the first time since I arrived on this planet, like the ground beneath me had shifted just slightly in my favor. Daniel changed the most. He started walking Mira down to meet me himself at the end of my shift, instead of sending her ahead the way he used to. At first I thought it might be caution, some new worry born out of the fire, a father wanting to keep his daughter closer after almost losing her. But it wasn't that at all. "I want people to see us together," he told me one evening, as Mira ran ahead of us toward the transit steps, chasing a paper wrapper caught in the wind. "I want them to understand that I trust you completely, and that trusting you was the best decision I have made since she was born." I did not have an easy answer for that. My people are not raised to expect declarations like that from humans. We are raised to expect distance, caution, doors that stay half closed no matter how long we stand outside them. So I simply said, "Thank you," and let the rest of it live quietly in my chest, where I could turn it over later, alone, and try to understand what it meant to be trusted so completely by someone who had every reason not to be. It was 3 weeks after the fire that the real test came, though none of us knew it was coming until it had already arrived. Mira had been running a fever for 2 days, nothing that seemed serious at first, the kind of thing that passes through children during the changing seasons. Daniel had a run scheduled to the outer ring that he could not delay, cargo contracts that would cost him his position if he missed the window twice in 1 month. He asked me to stay with her the way he had that very first time, except now there was no hesitation in the asking, no careful explanation of why he trusted me. He simply asked, the way you would ask any friend, and I said yes, the way you would answer any friend, without needing to think about it at all. On the second night of his absence, Mira's fever spiked. I woke to the sound of her crying, thin and exhausted, her small body burning under my hand when I checked her forehead. I had cared for sick children before, in the years before the collapse, but never alone, never with a father 2 days away, and no way to reach him quickly enough to matter. I did the only thing I could think to do. I wrapped her in a blanket, gathered what little medicine the apartment held, and carried her down to the medical station myself, moving through the dark streets faster than I had allowed myself to move in public in a very long time. The medical station was quiet at that hour, run by a night nurse named Iris who took one look at me, carrying a feverish human child through her doors, and did not hesitate, not even for a second. She waved me straight through to an examination room, checking Mira's temperature, listening to her breathing, moving with the calm efficiency of someone who had seen 100 frightened children pass through her doors and knew exactly how to steady the people who loved them. It's an infection, nothing life-threatening, Iris told me, already preparing a dose of medicine. But it needed catching. You did the right thing, bringing her in tonight, instead of waiting until morning. I sat with Mira through the rest of that night, her small hand curled around one of my fingers even in her sleep, the fever slowly breaking under the medicine Iris had given her. I did not sleep myself. I simply sat and watched her breathe, and understood something I had not fully understood before that night. Trust is not a single moment. It is not one father asking one dragon to watch his daughter for 3 days. It is every night after that, every choice to keep showing up, every decision to stay close even when staying close is frightening. Daniel arrived home the next afternoon to find Mira sitting up in bed, pale but smiling, insisting on telling him the entire story of the fever and the night nurse and the walk through the dark streets before he had even set down his pack. I watched him listen to every word of it, watched his face move through fear and relief, and something that looked almost like awe, and when Mira finally paused for breath, he looked at me over her head and simply nodded. "I don't know how to thank you for this," he said quietly, once Mira had drifted off to sleep again, worn out from the excitement of telling her own story twice. "You do not need to thank me," I told him. "I would not have done anything differently. That's exactly why I trust you," he said. "Because you never make me feel like I need to ask twice." I think about that evening often, the quiet apartment, the low hum of the city outside the window, Mira asleep between us with her fever finally broken. I think about all the nights before it, the years of keeping my head down, softening my voice, shrinking myself into something small enough not to frighten anyone. I think about how none of that had ever earned me anything close to what one tired, honest father had given me the very first time he looked at me and decided, against every warning his world had ever given him, that I was someone worth trusting. It has been almost a year now since that first evening he asked me to watch Mira. The station has not become an easy place, not entirely. There are still people who flinch when I pass, still doors that stay half closed, still whispers that follow me some mornings on my way to work. I do not think that will ever fully disappear. Not for me, not for anyone who looks the way I do, in a place that has not finished learning how to see us clearly. But there is a small girl who runs to meet me at the end of every shift now, unafraid, delighted, already talking before she has even reached me. There is a father who sets his hand on my shoulder like I am exactly what he says I am, a friend, someone he trusts with everything that matters most to him. There is a night nurse who waves me through her doors without hesitation, an old man who tells me his grandson's name with pride in his voice, a young woman who leaves bread out at the end of my shift because she does not know how else to say thank you. None of it erased 11 years of learning to fear what humans might do to someone like me, but it built something new beside that fear, something steady enough to stand on, and some mornings now, walking toward the station with the sun still low over the rooftops, I find that the fear has grown quieter than I ever thought it could. I am not sure I will ever stop noticing the flinches, the closed doors, the careful distance some people keep. I do not think that watchfulness will ever fully leave me, and perhaps it should not. But I have learned something in the year since Daniel first trusted me with his daughter's life, something I carry with me now every single day. Fear does not have to be the only thing waiting on the other side of trust. Sometimes, if you are patient and honest and brave enough to stay, even when leaving would be easier, what waits on the other side is something worth every year it took to find. That is the whole of what I have learned since the night a single father looked past everything he had ever been taught to fear and chose, instead, to trust me with the only thing in this world he could not afford to lose.